Okay, so we've been discussing our ideas about our frantic assembly piece and going about changing our introduction and building transitions between the three main relationships going on. How we could link them together was important, so not only physically showing this, but thinking about it, having lots of discussions about how they link together. So bringing us back to the introduction, we thought deeply about the generation gap, the changing of time, the progression of time, how we could physically show this. So we thought about the idea of them all sort of living three generations, about different kind of relationship dynamics in this one apartment setting. Obviously it's all abstract because it's frantic assembly and physical theatre. We changed the setup so that it was three risers in a staircase kind of look, so we could play about with levels, and we almost used each riser level as a different generation getting older, the increase in that. And I think it's all about symbolism, how you feel, how that might impact an audience. So that's what our intentions were when creating the three levels of the risers. So that's what we changed in terms of the set. We already had the set before we did the beginning. This time, because we felt like coming into an empty set slash fairly empty set that was already set up, it would give the audience some kind of feeling of like surroundings, that this was a building, that this wasn't some sort of metaphor for like the building a relationship, because we have so much of that dynamic anyway, and we could play more about that with frantic assembly techniques rather than building on other techniques that weren't exactly frantic assembly. So by having the set already there, it establishes a environment, building a situation, especially to an audience. We did the introduction of couples. So we thought a lot about how we were going to bring people on, because there's such a large amount of people in the group. To try and bring them all on at once would seem a bit chaotic. There is this idea of sort of organised chaos in frantic assembly style, but I think it would lose the sense of what we were trying to show. So we decided we'll build it up. So we'd have one couple already there, and then we build up. So it shows, like, it draws the audience attention to the new couples entering, then there's this chaotic moment over lots of movement, and then it draws back attention to the three main couples that the story, if you like, is centred around. So we've got those couples entering one by one using techniques like squeeze duets, using lifts and movements and push hands and drawing nerve lines and things like that. Within each other, some slightly improvised moments and some partnership moments that were devised. So looking at those and how we built them up, we had Alex and Hannah enter first. They did a chair duet sort of on the risers, so it was a lot of movement with them sitting down and leaning on each other, and I think this shows it sets the scene, conflicting relationships, so certain aspects of relationship like trust, loyalty, and then betrayal, things like that. And then that builds into some other interesting lifts that we added in. We added in a lift where Hannah is falling back, Alex is holding her hand as if to keep her up, but she's still falling, and we've got some supporting people behind Hannah. Then it comes into what we had devised in our partners. I was working with Izzy, so me and Izzy had devised three major movements, three major key like lifts. We had a lift, we had a push hands moment, and we had a squeeze movement. And in those movements, all we had to do was figure out how we could maximise our use of the set and the space that we had to get from one space to another to look like this organised chaos, because at the same time everybody else is doing a similar sort of thing, reaching back to the starting point and then all converging to the centre. We thought about how then we were going to go into the first piece. The order was important to us of how the pieces would go, so we obviously, and I've discussed before, that Marlon's, mine, Hannah's and Bella's should go first because it seemed like the older generation. Then we've got Bruce, Maya, Catherine, Joel, Izzy and Alex, and we've got Peter, Leah and Hannah at the end, showing the progression of generations. When doing this differently though, and the transitions, we realised that the other people weren't doing anything whilst separate scenes were taking place. Scenes, if you want to call them scenes. Separate pieces of devised pieces were taking place. So we thought about potentially converging back to the Risers as a whole group. And it gave this sense as well of bringing it back to your surroundings, bringing it back to the main message, and then across to the separate story. The movement as well travelled from the right hand side to the middle to the left. So with the riser, with the height of the riser, we had lifts in between. We still got to choreograph a few. We've got to look at the transitions between the second piece of movement to the third and the ending, but we'd figured out that potentially we could do something with Hannah. She could run up, we could do something like pulling her back down. It's all about the interaction between the group as well. We thought about introducing the ideas of like flirty tango to transition, so that adds in another technique that we learn, and it also works really well with the music that we were using for my piece and my group's piece at the beginning. When looking at what we developed, we looked at the way that from learning it the first time we'd ever done Frantic Assembly, from learning about how the guy who was leading it, could totally control a piece by changing certain small things. So by changing the music, we could change the atmosphere totally, but we wanted to keep that essence of like, it's about relationships and different relationships and changing of relationships. And by having like that duet to start off with, and it's centred on them, we could play about with lighting if we had more time. We could play about with different kinds of music there. I think we looked at like maybe doing a bass or something. So like how that would give a certain feeling of like the centres of like, this is a relationship, this is what a basic relationship looks like in terms of physical theatre and Frantic Assembly, and then building on that about different types of relationships. I feel like it's the expectations of relationships, and this wasn't always our intention when going into the piece. It's just something that we'd all agreed it gave off this feeling as, and then by changing where you would look, so I feel like Alex and Hannah too, they start with the duet on the Risers, where they look, if they look at each other more, then it'll show a deeper connection of a relationship. If they look away at certain points, it'll show this sense of breaking of relationship. So like by us even having that thought in our mind, like we learned from the workshop, creates a sense of like more about relationships and gives this a sense to the audience, even if we're not explicitly saying it's about that. And finally, I just wanted to speak about like why we changed the intro and the set. Moreover, like I'd already spoken about like how it was effective and what it had an impact on our piece. I think mainly why we changed the beginning was because it was too complex in what we were trying to show. Didn't really show off many Frantic Assembly techniques, and I think now it's a great improvement. We might even change it a little bit more, in the sense that having more interaction between the partners. with other partners. So moving through and over, when we did the exercise with push hands as a group in the workshop, there was a lot of interaction between different partners, so we might play about with that because then it will bring us all together as a group in this group message that we try and show the audience.